Hey, so it's been a while. I've gotten a few comments from people who said that they were in the process of playing Katamari Forever, so we're just gonna pretend that the only reason this video took so long to post is to give them time to finish the game, and no other reason. Hi guys, hope you had fun playing the game because I'm about to ruin it for you. Katamari as a franchise is not known for having complex storytelling. The plot, if you could even call it that, of most of the games amounts to little more than an excuse to get the ball rolling for the actual gameplay. And in most games, the story is basically just kept to a premise. The king breaks something, the prince does all the work to fix it, the end. Sure, there are sometimes flashbacks and everything gets resolved in the end, but let's be honest with ourselves, we're not playing Katamari for the plot. Or at least, that's how it appears to be on the surface. Some people have already talked about how the games, despite being mostly cheerful or just straight up absurd, do have some kind of disturbing elements, but they either bring up the same points again and again, or just make things up based on incredibly bad faith interpretations of the source material. But there is one storyline that tends to be either ignored or misunderstood by the fandom, and I'd like to talk about it today because I believe that the premise of Katamari Forever is not only blatantly depressing, it's scary. In fact, I'll take that one step further and say that with some slight adjustments, this premise could work just as well in the psychological horror genre. But before I get going with this, I'd like to make some disclaimers about what this video is not going to be so I don't waste anyone's time. First of all, I hope it doesn't look like I'm grasping at straws or making things up, and I especially don't want to come off like I'm saying this because I can't handle liking something lighthearted or fun, or that I think I'm too mature for that stuff, so I need to shoehorn a bunch of edginess into the game to justify liking something silly. I do like angst in horror media, but I recognize that there's a time and place for that kind of thing, and sometimes a fun ball game can just be a fun ball game, and it doesn't make you less smart or sophisticated for enjoying it. I'm only pointing out these dark elements because I think Katamari Forever can be enjoyed both on the surface level and when you read into it too much like I'm about to. But with that being said, if you're the kind of person who says it's not that deep or the curtains were blue or whatever, this probably won't be a video you'll enjoy. I am giving you the chance to turn back now. We are entering into the pretentious and melodramatic zone. You have been warned. But even though I'm going to be looking into this game way beyond what a normal person would be willing to do, that also doesn't mean that I think I'm some big intellectual or that I'm on my high horse or that I'm the first person to ever notice this stuff. I literally just haven't seen anyone talk about this, so I kind of want to get this conversation started because I really love this game and especially this weird oddball of a story. One more thing, this should be obvious to people who have played the game, but please be aware that I will be discussing mental health issues, child abuse, and a healthy dose of, let's call it, criticism of the King of All Cosmos. Okay, now with all that out of the way, let's roll. When people talk about dark or upsetting games, they are usually referring to stories in which the gameplay revolves around the player doing something immoral or trying to stop that thing from happening, and I think that's part of the reason why this game seems to be kind of underlooked in that department. Katamari Forever is different, in that with one big exception, the player's actions don't really affect the story at all aside from vaguely pushing it forward. There's not really any choices to be made, you don't even speak, you just roll Katamaris. So the story kind of happens around the prince, or whichever cousin you choose to play as. I'll just be referring to the playable character as the prince to save on time. This doesn't mean that there is no story, what it does is it makes the story character focused instead of plot focused. The center of Katamari Forever is focused around the two characters who give out the levels. These talking heads are the King of All Cosmos and his robot counterpart aptly named RoboKing. Immediately these two are set up as foils for one another, which basically means that they are opposites. Longtime fans of the series will recognize the king as someone who is extremely confident, narcissistic, flamboyant, and thinks of himself as the center of the universe, which, to be fair, he kind of is. In contrast, RoboKing, a new character in Forever, has no confidence. He's depressed, self-deprecating, and things never really go well for him. This characterization, of course, leads people to feel bad for him. But the real plot twist of the video that I'll just reveal immediately is that the reason this plotline is unexpectedly dark actually has very little to do with his personality. I'd argue that even if RoboKing was the most confident, happy person around, his story would still be a tragic one because of the inherent horror in being a temporary replacement. So, what even happens in Katamari Forever?
Sorry, regular Danny couldn't be here, so he sent me instead. I'm AI Danny. I'm an AI version of Danny, so I'm pretty much exactly the same as him in every way, except I don't have a soul. So it technically wouldn't be immoral to murder me.
Let's start by recapping the plot. The game starts with the prince trying to do the prince hop, and the king decides to show off with a mega jump, which is actually not impressive at all, considering they can fly, but whatever. And this fool doesn't look left, right, left again, and gets hit by a comet. And now he's in a coma and no one can find a way to wake him up. So, right off the bat, that's pretty dark already, especially since the cousins are children and now the cosmos is basically without a leader. Which, depending on who you ask, might be a good thing, but on a smaller scale, this kid's dad is in a coma and nothing he does can wake him. That's pretty traumatizing, but good news, the prince shows off some really impressive thinking and decides, hey, we'll just make a robot to do the king's work, insert joke about AI taking jobs. The actual process of making this replacement isn't really talked about, but based on the collection descriptions, it's shown that every cousin contributed, which is actually really sweet. Except maybe they didn't do a great job, since when they put in the reactor core, which is basically his power source, this will be important for later, this dude, Robo King, flips out and destroys the stars again due to a bug. So that's not great. Maybe the cousins could get better at coding if they used. Nah, I'm just messing with you. I'm not sponsored, but maybe if you want to support a Katamari creator, you could subscribe or something. I'm not like desperate or anything, but I do like big numbers. Anyway, the cousins fixed their mishap, and now there are two issues, but fear not because Robo King is here to help. Just look at the way he one-shotted the stars, he must be so badass. Okay, so three issues. This guy canonically has depression, anxiety, very low self esteem, not very mentally stable, and not at all prepared to take on this leadership position. It's implied that the cousins wanted to make a less narcissistic version of the king, but they swung the pendulum way too far in the other direction, and now this is the guy helping us rebuild all the stars, while we also simultaneously mess around in the king's head to bring back his memories and try to wake him up. So you go through the game, and so far everything's pretty smooth sailing. Maybe you failed a level or two, and maybe some of your Katamaris are duds, but one by one the stars are getting rebuilt, while the king slowly gets his memories back and is on the way to waking up. He still doesn't know about what's going on in his absence, and it seems like the prince has decided that they're gonna cross that bridge when they come to it, because for now it's more important to fix the problem that's right ahead of them, and hey, if they time it right, he might never even need to find out. Robo King is still anxious and way too stressed out, but he seems to be warming up to the prince and opening up to the cousins, talking about his personal opinions, even making jokes, and slowly stops making self deprecating comments. Kind of. He's still decidedly pretty miserable, but things seem to be slowly changing for the better, until about halfway through the game where he drops one line that changes everything.
We're doing well. Look at all the stars. So why is my internal doom sensor beeping?
Doom sensor? That doesn't sound good. Care to elaborate on that one? No? Well, okay, that just really gets me thinking about what he could have possibly meant by this. Doom for who and how? Okay, realistically, the most rational assumption for Katamari would be that there's going to be another star destroying event that we have to prevent. Or it could be that this living personification of anxiety was just being paranoid, or maybe it's a one off bit and nope, there it is again. Well, shoot, this has officially become what we in the biz call a plot point. Well, there's nothing to do except continue with the game. As we keep making stars together, Robo King seems to be simultaneously getting better and worse. He's developing a closer relationship with the cousins and might even be getting more confident, but is also seemingly cracking under the pressure of the star job and getting more unstable. And the Doom sensor also shows no signs of shutting off. But unfortunately, there's not really anything we can do about it. The prince is just a kid with no real power despite his title. The queen's busy trying to wake up her husband, and the king's, of course, not available at the moment. The only thing we can do is try to make really good Katamaris and hope that we can just get the king back up as soon as possible to get everyone out of this whole situation. Except that that line of thinking might lead you to potentially consider this.
Status reports. Yes, I think it's time we had an update. According to my calculations, at the very moment the king awakens. Error. Terror module engaged. Press any key to panic. Oh dear, this isn't good at all. It seems the future is so scary and bleak. My circuits won't let me speak about it. Go, roll, forget we ever spoke of this.
You know what? I never even considered that. I just kind of thought the stars were the source of this whole terror thing, but it's actually scarier and more insidious. Robo King has spent this whole time being a tool for other people to use for their own gain, and what happens when you can't use a tool anymore? You throw it away. What's the point of having a substitute when the real thing is back? He also knows the king well at this point, and is very aware of how he punishes those who offend or oppose him. It even seems to be some kind of premonition of the future kind of thing, which means for once, he's not being paranoid, although whether the player will pick up on that will depend. He's fully aware of what's going to happen, even if the prince can't really put the pieces together yet. A big point to be aware of is that even though Robo King is depressed, he's not suicidal. He has stated many times his fear of death and being hurt, and now he knows his days are numbered and he's probably going to meet a terrible end, but here's the thing. Now he actually has the chance to do something about it. Maybe off the king if he's really feeling extra, but at the very least go on strike and stop making stars. But he doesn't. Whether that's due to selflessness, his own lack of self-worth, a willing sacrifice, or just being too nice to even consider it is up for debate. He had every opportunity to turn against them, and he didn't take it. He tried so hard, he did everything they wanted from him, completely neglected his own well-being for the sake of the others, and that still wasn't enough. Once the final star is made, his last words are this.
Well, we replaced the moon. Almost done. Why is my terrifying future alarm sounding? Oh dear.
I cannot stress how important it is that he knew the whole time. It completely changes the tone of the story. Aside from all the reason I mentioned, Katamari Forever's story is special because it's one of the only instances of someone going through real character growth and development. He was on the path to getting better, and had the circumstances been different, I genuinely believe Robo King could have overcome his depression. He was so close, but of course, the goddamn monarchy came in and ruined everything. If you skip the dialogue like I did on my first playthrough, then you probably had no idea what was going on with this next part. But once you go back and read everything he says, that's when you realize that not only was the ending of this game tragic, it was inevitable. So, they wake the king up. Maybe if you're naive like me, you hold a small piece of hope in your mind that, hey, this is a wholesome series, maybe they'll find a way to subvert expectations. No, the real thing is back, making the cheap replacement copy obsolete. It's too much for Robo King. Let's not beat around the bush, this scene is a full-blown panic attack. Unlike what some sources may have you believe, this wasn't some big realization that he was now useless, he knew about that. But nothing prepares you for the sight of all your fears manifesting in front of your eyes, and he becomes overwhelmed with anxiety and flies off into the night. And then the king sees the prince running off after him, and then you know what happens next. I'ma be real, this next section was super hard to write, because I'm not sure how to approach this part without being completely melodramatic. I guess I'll start with the dialogue, since it's what I think makes this level really interesting. The scene opens up with the king giving his usual pre-level monologue, but this time there's a distinct anger to his words that we've never really seen before, not even after failing a level. He absolutely lets the prince have it for making a replacement of him, and then gets the bright idea to just get rid of it. Except he can't do it himself, of course. He's going to make the prince take the life of someone who has been by his side the entire game for the simple crime of just existing. Then you load into the level, and if you thought the king was done with his rant, obviously you're wrong. Once you've gotten this guy going, there's no stopping him. He just keeps throwing out insults, calling Robo King a waste of space, a monstrous creation, always calling him it an object. But the real winner of lines that keep me up at night is, "We'll hold it down, you hurry and clean it up." It's not even an insult, really, but the imagery it evokes is just disturbing in a very different way that I can't really describe. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but everything about this level, from the music choice to the locale, feels like it was purposely selected to be completely unsettling. Even the starting position, being on this ramp that takes some real effort just to get up, gives you just enough time to process everything. And take a look up here in the top left corner. You see that? Dramatic ellipses. This sentence is trailing off, which indicates reluctance, guilt, insecurity. Yes, I am seriously overanalyzing the grammar in a Katamari game, but come on, they were put there for a reason. Then there's the background, which is set up to look like a model kit with these plastic bits surrounding them. It's a visual representation of the absolute contempt the king has in seeing Robo King as a disposable object. When it's all done, the star he makes looks like an action figure, a cheap plastic imitation of the real thing. The toy comparisons don't end there, since he uses that term a few times during the farewell level, but Robo King wasn't a toy, he was fully sentient with wants, fears, emotions, sensory perception, and morals. There's no other way to describe it other than killing. Some have even called this an execution, which, yeah, it is. It's a spectacle meant to show exactly what happens to anyone who goes against the king. It is completely performative power tripping, designed not just to get Robo King out of the picture, but to humiliate him. Getting taken apart piece by piece, revealing everything on the inside, and oh yeah, you roll up his broken hearts. He just lays there, sad and helpless, until you finally roll up the core and the king ends this off by once again making it all about him. Even though the king acts like he's so disgusted and tries to distance himself away from this act, he is completely in control, and he set this up to send a message. He is almost acknowledging that this is, let's put it kindly, not a very nice thing to do, but he doesn't get to the point where he reconsiders his actions because he thinks he can do no wrong. He is enjoying the suffering he knows he is inflicting, while also playing the victim and pretending that he is the one who was hurt in this whole situation. I don't think this is ultimately all how he views it, but from an outside perspective, this is how it comes across. And the cherry on top is that the king is so damn proud of himself for this one. He even grades your katamari and makes fun of you if it's small, which is par for the course in this game, but it hits differently when, even after you basically end someone's life for him, he still can't be grateful or respectful. Then there's a throwaway line about having the dummy back around in no time, but at this point, who even cares? Pointless bonus level, happy ending sequence, credits, and now it's over. Now what? Robo King came and went, and they're not even acknowledging his existence. The king, of course, shows no sense of remorse. And now it's time for the postgame of this awful, emotionally devastating piece of crap game. Oh, right, Katamari Drive. You might think that since he doesn't permanently vanish, now this somehow constitutes a happy ending, but it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, and the journey was miserable. And it really, really proves how much the king didn't need to do all that. Now Robo King has become a servant, and is getting threatened to make new stars because we need a postgame. For some, it might be a relief, but for others, when you think about it, he's being intimidated into doing work he hated, exploited for labor, and bullied by the literal god of the universe, who proved he doesn't make empty threats. Sounds like such a fun existence. It's almost more insulting than if he just stayed dead. Oh, and if you go back to this level after the fact, look who's running the show. And if you had any doubt about the fact that being rolled up piece by piece might not be the most pleasant experience, he says that right at the start. I'm not really going to talk about this because it's post-game, therefore not canon and not a part of the story, but it's worth pointing out just in case anyone was curious about what happens if you try to replay it. However you feel about the ending is your own opinion, but it absolutely does not make up for anything that happened. It's a bleak ending to a tragic story. Okay, time to confess something. The first time I played this game, I had it spoiled for me. Yeah, I was having trouble on Make a Star 7 and decided to look up a walkthrough on game FAQs and scrolled a little too far. Whoops. The only thing this page said is, "You'll be rolling up Robo King, sad I know," which gave me pause. I then read through the rest of it, and thanks to Moo being so difficult to find, thank you Moo, got a pretty graphic description of how exactly this character I had grown attached to gets bumped off. By this point in my life, I was way past the age where I had seen media where characters get killed off, even the good guys, so I wasn't, disturbed at this revelation, just thought, wow, that's strange, if it's true, and continued on with my day. I did eventually beat that level, and continue the game as per usual until I made it to farewell. The first time I played this level, I kind of couldn't believe it. Even though I had had it spoiled for me and vaguely knew Robo King was going to get rolled up, I was not expecting this level of cruelty from a Katamari game. It's not that I thought it went too far or wasn't appropriate or anything, but it just kind of left me with a weird hollow feeling. And every time I think about it or replay it, it still does. Looking back, I think what was shocking was that this felt like quite the tone shift. But now that I think about it, it really wasn't as out of left field as I had thought. There's this piece of writing advice I had seen that basically says there's two types of bad endings. This story is a tragedy because it didn't have to end this way, versus this story is a tragedy because it was always going to end this way. Doomed by the narrative is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, and sometimes, dare I say, a little overused. Not every character that dies was doomed by the narrative, but when we take the whole story of Forever into account, we can see that Robo King really was. Again, if we take a step back and remove this base story from all the silliness and chaos of the Katamari franchise, it's the story of someone who was created out of desperation to be a substitute for a powerful figure in an extremely stressful position, who everyone knows as a very self-centered and volatile individual, known for violent and harsh punishments for anyone against him. That's a terrible situation for anyone to be in. But to put all of that on someone like Robo King, a serial warrior with no real support system to help him through this, yeah, he never had a chance. I want to make it clear that I'm not blaming the prince or the cousins for any of this. They didn't think it through all that well, but why would you expect them to? They're kids put in an extremely high-pressure scenario where they functionally have to take care of everything themselves, so it's not surprising they'd be desperate to do anything they can to solve this problem, even if it means not really thinking about the consequences. There wasn't anything they could do to stop the chain of events they put into motion, and the prince especially can't really have been expected to go against his father since, again, he is a kid who doesn't really have any outside influence. Of course he's going to do everything his king of the universe dad tells him to. There's also the point that the king was basically in a blind rage at this point, and we know he's not above hurting his son or their cousins. So no, I don't blame the prince at all. But on the other hand, I do see potential for this to be the moment where he starts questioning his devotion, especially if some of his cousins call him out for not standing up to his dad. If we're going to blame someone in this situation, I think it's pretty clear who's at fault. I actually have a little more to say on this, but we'll talk about that when I get to the next part, which should be right about now. Before getting into the analysis portion of the video, I'd like to take a second to talk about the fan response to Katamari Forever. This is all coming from a place of love because I truly think the Katamari fandom is one of the best, most wholesome communities out there. But with that being said, I think it's worth to talk about fandom if I'm trying to do a comprehensive analysis. Self-deprecating characters tend to be controversial, if not outright hated by the fandoms they come from.
Everybody hates me!
No, little dude, honest.
Hold on. I hate him.
But luckily, from my experience, that doesn't seem to be the case for RoboKing. I think it's because in Katamari, everyone's very extreme, and you kind of just need to put up with that in this game, and him being nicer than the king is appreciated. In fact, RoboKing seems to be a pretty loved character, even if it's for superficial reasons. There's even a small group who seems to have him on their hear me out cakes, and you know what? I'm listening. Anyways, despite this, I have noticed that some people have some misunderstandings of his character and motivations. And if you recognize what my username is a reference to, you will understand that I have experience dealing with fandoms that include people who are, how do I say this, victim-blaming brain-dead morons. And while Katamari fans are nowhere near as bad, there seems to be a small minority that is putting down RoboKing to defend the king. And on one hand, I get it, because it can be hard to accept that your favorite character was in the wrong. But even though I do defend legitimately innocent and misunderstood characters, I'm also no stranger to liking characters who have done bad things. But when I like them, I can accept that they are not morally perfect and sometimes outright villainous. What I don't do is ignore all the bad things they did, and I especially don't demonize another character in order to pretend that my problematic fave was acting in self-defense or being noble. This seems to especially be the case for characters who are, let's say, morally gray, but have a big personality, and their fans let them get away with stuff based on sheer audacity and vibes. Or to put it more bluntly, slayfulness. A lot of the times in fandom, iconicness lets characters get away with stuff, and their defenders tend to be the most insufferable people in any given fandom. Let me be clear, I'm not saying you can't like the king. I like him, but it is a misreading of the source material to say he never does anything wrong, and I think the ending of Forever is a really clear case of him doing something wrong. You could say, yeah, but RoboKing was going on a rampage and the king was trying to save the cosmos, but let's listen to his dialogue here. Even if the save the world thing is mentioned by him, he literally says that his motivation is that he's crashing out on the prince because they built a copy of him, and he doesn't like that. I'll talk more about what that says about him later, but for now, whatever threat RoboKing supposedly poses is not even described by anyone, they just say he's a threat. It almost reads more as an excuse than anything. Let me remind you that there is literally no dialogue in this scene. It just shows the RoboKing downward spiraling with anxiety, growing big, and flying off. It's possible some people thought he was going to go break the stars again so he could at least be useful, but that's not explicitly stated, and it doesn't really make sense when you think about it. Another theory could be that he was going to go tank out the king so he could keep his position, but that makes even less sense since he flew off away from the royals. And if he wanted to do that, he had the opportunity and didn't. My most charitable guess for what the most likely excuse the king used is that he is a loose cannon who needs to be taken out. But again, that's not confirmed. And even if it was true, there are ways to subdue that threat that aren't so horrific. And if we go to the scene to see what he was thinking, it was clearly anxiety about how now that the real thing is back, he's going to get killed and he just didn't want to die, which, I don't know, I think that seems pretty reasonable. It's more likely that he just ran off to escape that fate, considering he says that multiple times. At the end of the day, this is just a video game and everyone's allowed to have their own opinions about it. If for some reason you hate Natsuo and you think the campfire level is a masterpiece of game design, that's fine. We don't really have that much control over how something makes us feel, and as long as you express it in a kind, healthy way, people are allowed to disagree with each other on these topics, since again, it's just a game. I've made some pretty harsh criticisms of some Katamari stuff before, but that doesn't mean I'm the only authority on these topics. I just like to engage in some light comical exaggeration of how I personally feel. However, if your opinion about something, especially story or character, is based on something that is provably false and contradicted both by what the game straight up says and basic logic, then I don't know what to say about that. I guess just I urge you to maybe reconsider that one. But then, why did the king overreact so much? Let's talk about it, because I believe that this one moment does more for his characterization than the entirety of the game supposedly talking about his mentality. Okay, I'll stop talking about how much I hate Touch My Katamari and get into why I think this is such a great insight into who the king is, and why I believe he reacted like that. To put it simply, it's because he's insecure. Really? This guy?
I am not insecure, needy. God, that's a joke. How could I ever be insecure? I was the snowflake queen.
Yeah, while the king is usually confident and prideful, his pride is very easily shattered under the right conditions, and those conditions are whenever someone challenges his power. Not to bring up Touch My Katamari again, but in that game, he goes into an identity crisis when someone says he's equally as awesome as the school principal. There's also the point that Papa raised him to just be the king and nothing else, since he wasn't allowed to do anything other than train for his eventual position, which would really mess up a kid's development and sense of self-worth. He's so defensive over his position because due to his upbringing, he believes that he's nothing without it, even if this is something he will never admit to himself. So of course, when he saw what he perceived to be a threat to his power, he flipped out since he's so desperate to cling to his title, and by extension, his identity. Notice how he never refers to Robo King as Robo King, just as Robo or a variety of mean names. He's also very worried about how people perceive him. For reference, go play We Love Katamari, it's a great game. And also, when he's laying down his rant on the prince, he kinda has a Freudian slip and drops the line, "This is how the prince sees us?" There it is, that's why he's so offended. This is all buried under many, many layers of meta and consciousness, and it's on a level that I don't think the king even recognizes, but it's still there and it's hurting the people around him. And since he couldn't recognize the real reason he was so upset when he saw this imposter, he made up an excuse to act like the victim in the situation, like his own son betrayed him. That doesn't make this okay, it's an explanation, not an excuse, but Robo King and the prince ultimately paid the price for his inability to confront his own feelings. There's a theory going around that his reaction to Robo King was a spur-of-the-moment lash-out, and he doesn't have any real resentment towards him, but sadly, I really don't buy this theory. I wish I could, but it just doesn't agree with what we're shown in the game. The idea behind this is that since Robo King gets rebuilt by someone, probably the king, it means he realized he was wrong and brought him back to fix his mistake. That's kind of a nice way of looking at it, but yeah, he only got brought back so he could be used for labor, which, again, is stated in the game. And even if he secretly had some epiphany and stopped hating Robo King, it kind of doesn't matter since his actions are still horrible to him. What you think about someone doesn't matter if you act like a dick to them. Oh my god, is the king a tsundere? What about the prince? Well, the way he made Robo King says a lot about his character as well. Let's start with the obvious. Robo King is, and you might want to sit down for this one, actually nice to the cousins, and it's not just when you roll a good Katamari. It's implied that this is, of course, because the cousins made him to be this way. Katamari Wiki, which, by the way, I'm the 12th ranked editor on, so yeah, I'm qualified to talk about this, puts forth two possible reasons. That this is the way they want the king to be, or that they see past his attitude and know that deep down he cares about them. Both of these are probably true, but that raises another point. If the prince wants someone who's caring towards him, why does Robo King still punish you when you fail a level? I mean, the prince had complete control over building him. Oh. It might seem a little nonsensical at first, but unfortunately, this is often how abused kids will act, since this is what they think is normal and appropriate. Why would the prince oppose this treatment when it's literally all he knows? It's the same with the king and how his father treated him, so now he's continuing the cycle with his kid, and now the prince is continuing it too. Just to make it absolutely clear, that does not make this okay at all, but even though we, the audience, know better, the prince believes he deserves to be punished, and that's really, really sad. Well, I guess that's all for Katamari's canon storyline. Oh, hey, do you want another 500 meter? What about the comic? Oh, okay, fine. First and foremost, let me make it very clear that I love the Shifty Look Katamari comic. Written by Alex Kulang and Ray Castro, it mostly consists of humorous, lighthearted misadventures that the prince and the cousins keep getting themselves into. It's wholesome, funny, and even has the occasional awesome action sequence. It was a big inspiration for my own art, and I'd recommend it to any Katamari fan, since you can really tell that everyone involved had so much love for these games. But it's important to mention that for the story purposes, the comics aren't canon exactly. They're basically published fanfiction, which is not something I say to discredit them, no, not at all. Just pointing out that the story basically takes place in a different universe than the games, if that makes sense. They're their own thing, and for what they are, they're great. So then why are we even talking about this? It's because, well, first of all, I wanted an excuse to yap about it, but mostly because the second arc of the comic is a continuation of Katamari Forever, featuring Robo King kind of having a villain arc? I say kind of because it's a little complicated. At the very least, he's the antagonist. To summarize the story arc, it's a time travel situation where the prince goes back in time to warn the past version of himself about some terrible cataclysmic event that destroyed Earth in his timeline, and the two princes head off to prevent this from happening. After assembling a legendary team of cousins, the future prince explains that the thing that caused the Earth's destruction is none other than a katamari, except this katamari was built with a special power that sucks in everything nearby like a broken heart, but way more powerful. Maybe a little bit too powerful. Yeah, so the plan is to go convince the inventor of this nuke to maybe not use it, but that might not be so easy, since the one who made it is of course Robo King, who somehow reassembled himself and invented this super katamari to prove himself better than his counterpart the king. When confronted, he monologues to the cousins about how he deserves to be king, although his motivation isn't clearly explained beyond that. Probably he just wanted power, but it's up to interpretation. He sets up the katamari, making it basically a ticking time bomb, and holds the cousins captive until Opio disarms him. Without any other options, the cousins attempt to stop the katamari by sending it into the time portal the prince used, and behold, it works. Happy ending. Obviously, Robo King acts very different here from how he does in the main game. So the important question is this mischaracterization? I mean, I've been defending Robo King so much that you'd think I would absolutely hate this, but no. In the game, Robo King never wanted power. In fact, he hated being king and constantly complained about how all the stress was getting to him. The reason he kind of lost it at the end was because he just wanted to live and not get thrown away when he outlived his usefulness. His personality is also dramatically different with no real explanation for why he changed so much. Like, I just can't see this guy putting up full-length portraits of himself on the walls of his throne room. But also, everyone is different in this version, so it's not a misunderstanding of anyone in particular, it's just that this is the tone the comic is going for. The formerly silent prince is now a serial yapper, Ace is a cocky and jealous jerk, Opio is like that, so no, I wouldn't say they misunderstood Robo King's story, partially because I don't really think I have the authority to say that, but also because the writers just took some creative liberties, nothing wrong with that. The other reason why I believe Robo King is different here is that this book is focused on comedy. It has a light tone, even the badass action moments have jokes thrown in, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. Therefore, a lot of the dark parts of the games were toned down a bit, and the most prominent example is the portrayal of the king. To keep up the lighthearted tone, he had to be portrayed in a somewhat good light, or else he wouldn't be likable, at least not in a way that fits the mood they're going for. For example, he's still pretty hard on the prince, but he never takes it too far, or at least not as far as his in-game counterpart. He's also more sympathetic than in the game, since you see more of his vulnerable, personable side, so they had to make you like him so you could laugh at him at his high points and feel bad for him in his low moments. Therefore, I think the artists kind of wrote themselves into a corner by getting Robo King involved, because as I said, his situation is one of the king doing something very selfish and cruel. That whole backstory is kind of glossed over in the comic, they just say he flipped out because he felt unwanted, and now he's bitter and upset he got ditched. I don't know the full extent of Alex and Ray's thoughts on Katamari Forever, but the author commentary shows that they didn't want to write him as a truly evil villain, rather as someone with a good idea and a accidentally wrong execution. If this story had had a different tone, I think it would have been interesting to see some genuine criticisms of the king come through in this story, and to have Robo King have been motivated by revenge, since, I'ma be real, I love a good revenge story. You could even keep the bit about wanting to one-up him with his Robo-Katamari. Maybe he wants the king dethroned because he sees him as incompetent or worse, corrupt for using his power against him in the way that he did. He absolutely deserved to crash out on the king. That would have been so cathartic. But that's not the tone we got, so it probably wouldn't have fit, and it also would have been way too long to fit into this short little story arc. I would have also liked to have seen Robo King again after this plotline, maybe reprising his role from the game as a servant, but oh well, it's Shifty Look's fault for canceling the comic. Bottom line, comic Robo King is a sympathetic character who never does anything outright bad, but his motivation and personality are different than in the game. But that's true for everyone. Since it's a different story that's going for different things, my advice would be don't get caught up in the differences between the two versions of events. Just enjoy the comic for what it is, and you'll probably have a good time. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some miscellaneous theories and observations that I found in order from least to most out there. One of the more widespread misconceptions about Katamari Forever is that all of Robo King's levels are original, and the king is the only one who uses old levels. This is a very understandable conclusion to reach since it's absolutely what they should have done, but no, all of Robo King's levels, except the Sprinkler, are remakes from past games. The obvious reason for using recycled levels is that the king is suffering memory loss, so playing these levels helps him remember them, while Robo King is replacing the stars he broke. A difference that actually is there is that Robo King's levels tend towards being graded based on size, and the King's levels usually have a more complicated gimmick involved. These sometimes overlap. For example, the Constellations and Animals levels have the same find all the pieces thing as the King's School and Clean Up the Room time trials, but they are usually categorized based on requirement. This also kind of reflects their personalities, with the King being weird and extra and Robo King knowing how to get to the point. If this means anything story-wise, it could have to do with the King's insecurities about being replaced. This would have been much more apparent if Robo King had had new levels, since it would have provided contrast, having this very modern character take charge with new original levels while he's stuck in the past. It would have made the motivation for his crash out slightly more clear, although still entirely unjustified. But even with the story we ended up getting, it still kind of helps the story from Robo King's perspective. It puts a time limit into place, since they aren't making new stars, they're replacing the old broken ones. So it sets a clear goal that must be accomplished, and each time they make a new star, it's like a countdown, until he has no purpose and is screwed. I mean, they still could have done this replacing them thing, even with new levels like they did in the past games, or the timer could have been the king waking up, but whatever, I'm trying to meet them where they're at. If I had it entirely my way, the old levels brought back would have been these, but I'm curious to know people's opinions on this. Like the levels, the Katamari soundtrack is mostly comprised of remixes. In my opinion, the best of these remixes is Kimi Takamatsume's remix of the Royal Academy of Katamari, with Crimson Rose and Gin Tonic taking a close second. Oh by gosh, by golly, this song. Choosing to use a remix of the Royal Academy of Katamari, one of the King's music themes that plays during the intro cutscene and his focus level in Beautiful Katamari during the farewell level, was such an unbelievably gigabrain genius decision. Whoever made it deserves like 20 raises. True to its name, Royal Academy of Katamari is a very, well, royal-sounding music piece. It's grand and slow and uses classical instruments. Through these associations and the use of the song during important character moments, it's become something of a theme song for the King of All Cosmos. This alone makes it an insane needle drop for, let's call a spade, Robo King's execution. But they don't play the original version. No, they play a remix, using instruments that are associated with Robo King. Not really sure what this genre is called, but it's more technologically inspired. Go listen to this, it's actual peak. And what makes it even more peak is the way the level and the song go together. The intro is slow, bleak, and hollow, with whatever instrument this is sounding like a warning siren as you start that slow roll up the ramp. Almost like the prince or whoever is having mixed thoughts, feeling uneasy, unsure if this is the right thing to do. Then at about 30 seconds, the beat drops and hits you with the melody of the Royal Academy of Katamari, the king's theme, as the player gives into his demands and rolls up that broken heart. From here, the song is faster and upbeat, but there's this sinister edge to it underneath it all. The main instrument here almost sounds like a drill. Listen. And it keeps getting intercut by these parts that sound like the 30-second alarm, fueling the high intensity of this moment. But once the song reaches about the 2-minute mark, something changes. It's slight at first, then the song gets more uncanny. And at 3 minutes, it fully shuts down, going into this slow, cosmic, weirdly atmospheric bit, and then replaying the intro, although much quieter this time. Over the full runtime of the song, it keeps switching between high and low energy, but the overall progression tends toward getting slower and less energetic, like a machine shutting down. Does this represent how the prince is slipping back into uncertainty and sadness? Maybe. Some people have said that this song playing during this dark moment gave them tonal whiplash, and while I understand that perspective, I still think this song is a perfect mix of energetic, silly weirdness and genuine emotion, much like the game Katamari Forever. It really enhances the level by both contrasting and embracing the sad tone, all while just being a really good remix on its own. If only they hadn't spoiled this song during the Animals level and saved it for this emotional moment, oh, that would have been a godsend. So, I alluded to this slightly in the level ranking, but I don't really know how to address this without getting into fanfiction territory. So, if you want to be upset, I guess I will point you to please consider this. And now this. Just thinking about the implications of how they might be affected is a really effective strategy for ruining your own day. Okay, full disclaimer, this one's pretty bonkers and I'm not expecting anyone to buy it, but this wouldn't be a theory video without one theory that's just completely insane. Uh, in the show Revolutionary Girl Utena, they have these scenes in the middle of episodes where these faceless narrator girls do a little skit that vaguely relates to whatever's going on in the episode. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? The Jumbo Man episodes show the process of how the comet that bumped off the king was made, but what if it also subtly reflects the main story of Katamari Forever? The main piece of evidence is this first one, where number 1, who I'm interpreting as the king figure, says this. I mean, come on, machine flight is for the weak, right after they make a machine to replace him? Doesn't matter, I'm right about this one. So yeah, Katamari Forever, huh? I'm not saying it's some masterpiece of writing or the most complex game you'll ever play, but I do sincerely believe that there's more to this game than meets the eye. No one ever really talks about this part, even in the fandom, and I think that's a shame because no matter how you feel about the gameplay, the story underneath is actually really interesting, even if it's just to me personally. I hope this made sense. I'm not great at explaining myself or putting my weird artsy feelings into words, but I don't know, hopefully it still turned out okay. I really want to make friends with Katamari fans, especially those who are as brain-rotted about the game as I am, so if you fit that bill, maybe head on over to my community page. It's open for anyone to post in, so I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Once Upon a Katamari is a video game, so my next video will be a review of that game, and then of course a level ranking. In the meantime, I hope to see you again soon, and have a nice day.